Ubisoft is having a really rough go of things at the moment. I talked about this in my last video, but they've been struggling to release new games, they've cancelled and delayed a bunch, and most of their attempts at creating new IPs have failed. 2023 is off to a terrible start for Ubi, but a few years back they put this strategy, or I guess plan, into place where they would focus on building and continuing their biggest already existing IPs, being Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Rainbow Six, The Division, and Ghost Recon. No Watch Dogs, unfortunately, but I am relieved to know they won't be abandoning Ghost Recon even after that whole disaster with Frontlines, which I'll get into later. But what exactly is the next step with Ghost Recon? Where do they go from here? The last game was obviously Breakpoint, which will be coming near 4 years old, and we've heard absolutely nothing from Ubisoft themselves about what the next step for the series is. However, there have been some reports coming out about the next possible game. Now, admittedly, Ghost Recon has never been my favorite IP in Ubisoft's roster. Assassin's Creed and Far Cry have always been the big ones for me, but Ghost Recon has a very dedicated, more niche community, and they've kind of been neglected in recent years. Now, I haven't played the very first Ghost Recon games. I've played Future Soldier, Wildlands, and Breakpoint. I do hope to play some of the earlier ones sometime, but like most Ubisoft franchises, Ghost Recon has seen a pretty drastic shift from what it originally was. I really enjoyed Future Soldier. Single-player tactical shooters feel more and more like a rarity these days, especially linear ones, and Future Soldier was just a really fun, stealth, tactical, squad-based shooter. But like most everything now, Ghost Recon would then transition into an open-world format with Wildlands 5 years later, basically serving as a reboot for the series. However, Wildlands did a great job. It kept a lot of what people loved about the series initially in those older games, with a focus on being tactical, working with a squad, immersion and realism, and a lot of options for stealth. Maybe some people still prefer what Ghost Recon was, but it really felt like Ubisoft Paris knew and understood what people loved about Ghost Recon and brought that into a new and refreshing world. They did a great job at listening to their community by adding things like Ghost Mode, which puts focus on being even more realistic, with permadeath, only being able to carry one primary weapon, friendly fire, all that good stuff. Wildlands is my personal favorite Ghost Recon game, and it had a generally very positive reception from the community, trying to innovate and bring a refreshing take on Ghost Recon while keeping the core and identity of what so many people enjoyed about the games in the first place. And then comes Breakpoint 2 years later in 2019, where they pretty much abandoned a lot of what people loved from Wildlands and implemented mechanics that were unwanted, like gear levels, a hyper focus on collecting loot, and you no longer had a squad of AI teammates to strategize with. This, on top of the game being full of bugs, led to a terrible launch. It's kind of hard to believe that Ubisoft Paris, the same studio that brought Wildlands and listened and understood the community, suddenly strayed so far from what people wanted. But to their credit, Breakpoint was not abandoned and received lots of updates for a long time, listening to the fans' feedback and criticism, where they added an immersion mode that gets rid of those different weapon rarities and gear levels. They even brought back the AI squad, and they continued to bring new content and DLC to the game for quite a while. I enjoy Breakpoint now. I think it made a good comeback and has some of the best animations I've seen in any Ubisoft game, especially those takedowns, possibly some of the best takedown animations I've seen in a game, period. Now, there are still some fundamental things to the game I'm not a huge fan of, like the story and the world, which just doesn't come close to beating Bolivia from Wildlands. But overall, I think Breakpoint eventually won over people, including myself. Not to mention, it has John Bernthal. Who doesn't love that guy? But once again, Ubisoft, in their vast and infinite knowledge, squanders this by announcing a first-person free-to-play battle royale, Ghost Recon Frontlines. I just mentioned how the Ghost Recon community is very niche, and what people love about the series is the tactical stealth shooter element. So all that announcement did was piss all those people off. Literally nobody wanted this game. It clearly wasn't made for Ghost Recon fans. It was made to try and become the next Fortnite or whatever. Ubisoft has been so desperate to have a big free-to-play live service title they can fill with microtransactions microtransactions, and it's clear that they thought they could milk the Ghost Recon name to get more players. So it was never a game intended for Ghost Recon fans, so how did they expect this to work? But once again, whoever thought this was a good idea clearly didn't understand the fans of Ghost Recon. Keep in mind, this game was pretty much ready to be released. It was all but finished, and the backlash was so negative, Ubisoft decided it would be better to scrap the entire thing rather than try to release it and at least make some money back. It wasn't worth the massive hit to their reputation. And honestly, canceling this monstrosity is one of the smartest things they've done in a while. I feel bad for the people who had to work on this game because it was absolutely doomed to fail and all their efforts would be wasted. I was a little bummed out I couldn't play it just to make fun of it, but oh well. But that brings us to now. So what in the world does Ubisoft do with Ghost Recon from here? I was worried for a long time they would abandon this IP. It's not as big and successful as some of their other franchises, and they've been on a bad streak, first with the launch of Breakpoint and then the whole Frontlines fiasco. I totally wouldn't have been surprised if they stopped making Ghost Recon games, or at least for a while. But thankfully that doesn't appear to be the case. Reportedly, emphasis on reportedly, there's a new Ghost Recon game in the works that's expected to release in 2025. What will this game look like? Well, Ubisoft did promise after support for Breakpoint stopped that the feedback and hard lessons they learned from Breakpoint would help shape the future of the series. But Frontlines was announced not too long after that. But I assume they meant for the real next Ghost Recon game that I assume will also be developed by Ubisoft Paris. And if they really do use that feedback from Breakpoint and all the changes they made and look at what worked so well with Wildlands, it would be pretty hard to go wrong with the next game, or so I would hope. The advantage with Ghost Recon and it being not as big or popular as, let's say, Assassin's Creed is that most of the community is pretty in unison. It's not totally divided, kind of like Assassin's Creed. A lot of Ghost Recon fans want the same thing, therefore making it easier for Ubisoft Paris to take that feedback and understand what their fans want. I mean, obviously not everyone is always in full agreement, but looking at the overwhelming negative responses to Frontlines, it's clear Ghost Recon fans are passionate and know what they want. So again, I mean, never say never with Ubisoft, that's expectations 101, but knock on wood here, with such clear direction and feedback, it would be pretty hard to mess this up yet again. I really hope I don't regret saying that. But take what people loved about Wildlands with some of those amazing animations from Breakpoint and create another immersive, beautiful world like Bolivia, and I think you're golden. I mean, obviously story is important too, but when it comes to Ghost Recon, I care most about gameplay and atmosphere. So let's get some prayers in the comments. Please be good. It feels like Ghost Recon is kind of hanging by a thread right now, so this next game really needs to deliver, or I fear we may not see the series return for a while. And hopefully we can avoid what's kind of going on with Watch Dogs right now, where it seems like there's no plans for another game in the foreseeable future. But if you're a Ghost Recon fan, let me know your thoughts on the future of the series. Also, give me some recommendations for some of the older games in the series. I've been wanting to get into it more, but there's a lot of games, and I don't really know where to start, so some advice would be much appreciated. But other than that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you considered leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you're new. Big thank you to my members for wishing to support me further. And yeah, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.